So before we go on into Chapter 3, which we will in just a minute, the essential JavaScript statements, before we go into this, I've given you each an example. I've emailed it to you, and I want to go over the example. Again, it may not totally make sense to you. You've got it both in a hard copy format. I threw it in a Word file. And you've got it, I just emailed it to you. Now, if you look up on the screen here, my guess is, I'm hoping I'm right here, everything that's right here, so basically the first 7 lines and lines 10 and 11, those make sense to every one of you. We've worked with them before. You've even used the script tag to add different things for Bootstrap. So I'm not going to talk about those. All right? What I will talk about is lines 7 through 9. Even though we've had 7 before, this says make a button. Literally, make a button. When you click the button, we want to call a routine called main. Well, it's not on here. That's in the other file. All right? And the value of the button should be run program. So really what's new in here is this. All right? JavaScript, again, is what's considered an event-driven language. The event in this case is you clicking that button. When you click that button, what the system will try to do is to execute whatever is in this routine called main. So what's in there? Well, let's bring that up. A lot of stuff on here, sorry. But if you look, main is what's referred to as a function. In an ideal world, a function will perform one task. Did you hear that? All right. We're not in an ideal world yet. So the reason I'm telling you that is normally what I should do is that should be one function, 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 and that should be one function. All right? Now, do you have to do that? Of course not. But if you write code that way where each function has a specific job, all right, you'll be better off. Because if you get an error in a certain routine, you know exactly where that error has to be. Whereas what we've done now is we put everything together into just one big routine. All right? So as we're starting to learn it, that's fine. But again, normally I would have several functions, not just one. So what you use as delimiters or bookends in JavaScript are curly braces. Some languages you use the words begin and end. Sometimes it's curly braces. It could be something else. All right? In here, in JavaScript, it's curly braces. All right. Now, what this line, these 2 lines are saying, this right here, prompt, enter a number, and 100. All right? You'll notice that it says another number. That's going to literally bring up on our screen a prompt dialog box. It's going to say, enter a number. And it's going to have a box in here where you can enter a number. The 100, this is not mandatory, this stuff right here. That's a default. So it'll have 100 in it. So if you just hit enter, it'll take 100 and it'll assign it to number 1. Then there'll be a button down here that says OK, and a button over here that says cancel. All right? Then the next line will say enter another number, and it'll be the same thing. All right? So what lines 3 and 4 are doing is they are declaring a variable, var number 1, var number 2, and initializing it to a value. Can somebody who has not answered this question before answer, if I leave that blank, what value is going to be put into number 1? NaN. So if I leave it blank or I put something non-numeric, it comes in as NaN. Now, a weird thing about JavaScript, most other languages don't allow you to do this. But if this comes up like I showed you before, if this says enter a number, you got that box there with 100 in it, and you've got an OK, and you've got a cancel here. In most programming languages, if I put 100 and if I put the letter A afterwards, the program would blow up. It's expecting a number and I put something non-numeric in it. JavaScript is different. What JavaScript says is number, 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 not number, just throw that away. So unlike other languages, there's a case where JavaScript it's a little kinder, if you call it that. Am I right in assuming that if you look on the screen here, at least you all understand what that's doing, correct? It's going to add the two numbers, subtract the second from the first, multiply the first by the second, and divide the first by the second. Okay? Then what we're doing here is we're building an output string. So, although I didn't do it on yours because I just wrote this quickly, all right, I'm going to put a couple comments in here. Just so, again, you get used to seeing comments. So I'm going to come in here. Oops. Don't want to do that. I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to say, there's the beginning of my program. There's the end of my program, okay? Declare variables. Calculate sum. Not there. And I could come in and say calculate difference, etc. This would say, let's say I want to put this over 2 lines. I can say then build the output string. So you can see how multi-line comments work. All right. Output everything. All right, because that's what I'm doing. So that threw a bunch of comments in there. Do we need those? No, but just to show you. And to show you, at least on this editor, the coloring that takes place when you do that. All right. Keywords are blue. All right. Built-in methods come in brown, like this and like this. All right. Anything that's black is something that's user-created. So again, if I run this now, how do I run this? I don't run the JavaScript program. I go back to my HTML. So I go over there and I, again, did I save this? Doesn't really matter. But if I save, okay, if I come in here now, I say run, launch it in Chrome. That's a really ugly interface. There's just a button on there. That's all I put in there. So run the program. That's an alert. Enter a number and it's got a default value in there. So I'm going to put in 1, 2, 3, 4. No significance there. Then enter a number, another number rather, 3, 4, 5, and hit enter. And notice then it tells me the sum, the difference, the product, and the quotient. All right? So it did everything that I asked it to do. Now, a couple things, just so you see this. Some of it you've already seen, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to leave the first number blank. All right? And I'll put in 100 for the second number. Notice how I get NaN for everything. Because the first number was null. It was not a number. So everything that came in there was not a number. The same thing would happen if I came through here and I ran it and it asked for a first number and I put in hello and goodbye, for example. Notice they're all NaN. All right? Now, one more thing. Then we're going to go back, start on Chapter 3. That is, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put in, run the program, and I'm going to put 100 in for my first number, 0 in for my second number. All right? Notice the quotient is infinity. That actually is what you get when you divide by 0. In some programming languages, when you divide by 0, the program blows up. You get what's called a divide by zero exception. Here, it actually tries to do the math and it gives you infinity. All right? We'll account for that in just a little bit. All right? It's not that big a thing one way or the other. Now, one thing I just so you know I could have added, I guess I forgot all about it, but I could have come back to here. Let's get rid of all those comments just so it's easier for you to read. I'll leave that in there and just get rid of all these. All right. I could have also come in here and done this, and I could have said var mod, which is the remainder operator, equals that, and then I'd have to put in here the percent sign. All right. Again, I didn't have to do that. I wasn't told to do that or anything else, but it would have worked fine if I would have done that. All right. Then I could have actually printed that out down here too. Oops. And I want to show you this because you may or may not have noticed it. See this? That tells it to only do it to 2 decimal places. All right? Why is that a big thing? I'm going to remove the 2 fixed. All right? I don't need it for the remainder because that doesn't make sense. But this will have to be then, what do we call that? Mod. All right? But notice if I come in here now and run this again, and I put in, for example, 345 and 19. Now I get, for that answer, 18.1578944736, etc. All right? It does it into a lot more decimal places. But if I come back and change it back then from that to dot 2 fixed, which is case sensitive, all right, and I go back and run the program again, I can rerun it by just refreshing my browser window and again put in 345 and 19. Notice now that the quotient is, I don't know why it did that, but it gave it 18. Gets rid of the decimal places. I can put it to as many decimal places as I want it to be put to. All right. So let's jump back in. Oh, it's because I didn't put a number in there. That's why. 2. Try it one last time. 345 and 19. And it gives me an answer of 18.16 with 2 decimal places. All right. So what's in this particular example? How to use what are called relational operators, logical operators, and this. These are called control statements. Do you ever have this? You ever driving down a road and you get this? In other words, the road ends and you either have to go off to the left or you have to go off to the right. All right? I mean, everybody's had something like that. That's kind of an if statement. Okay? So I could say this, if, for example, gender equal F, then I could say something like document dot write female else document dot write male. I'm asking you this question. Does that make sense to everybody? You're asking a question that's got a yes/no answer. Now, if we did this, if you were a male, nothing would happen. All right? And I could also come in here and put else if gender equal M document dot write male else we could put in here, I know that's getting hard to read, sorry, but we could put in document dot write gender unknown. And the key takeaway, what I want you to understand from this is, so I put a curly there and a curly there, is either that line would execute, or that line would execute, or that one would. One of those three lines must execute, but only one can execute, because there's only one way in which that condition would be true. All right? And if you understand that, you are starting to understand how to do conditional logic. All right? So for instance, and that's, male, female, that's just one because it's used. But let's just say that I wanted to do something, if you are a first-year student, then you can go, let's say, for example, then you can go to the Wentzville job fair. But you can't go to the St. Louis. Let's just say they made some condition like that. Else, if you are a second-year student, you can't go to the Wentzville job fair, but you can go to the one in St. Louis. Otherwise, if you're not a first or second year, maybe you're just taking a gen ed class and you're really not either one, you can't go to either one. That kind of thing. So you can express conditional logic in a lot of ways. Just so you see this, because I do want you to see it. If we go back to that example I showed you before. All right. This thing where we did the quotient and where we did the modulo. All right. Typically, I wouldn't do it like this. All right. Instead, I would say var quote like this. Just like that. I'm going to grab this code that's right here. I'm going to cut it. And I'm going to put it down here because I'll use it in a minute. And I'm going to just cut this code here. All right. But I'd say if number 2 not equal to 0. All right. If it's not equal to 0, well, then I know it's valid. So then I can do this. See that? So I'm only doing the math, so to speak. I'm only doing the math if that particular value is not 0. If it is, because I don't want, let's say I don't want infinity type of an idea. All right? It's just an example. So if it's not 0, I could do that. All right? And I can also do the other one. And then I could say here else, and what I'll do is I'll just set them both. So I'll come in here and say quote equals 0, mod equals 0. All right, I could give a message too. I'm not going to. So you'll notice that if I do that, if I do that, and now I come in here and I run this, if I put in like we did before, 345 and 19, still works. Oh, that's nice. Should have worked exactly the same, except I put an error in my code. To fixed of undefined in main. Okay, we'll have to fix that. That's fine. All right. Oh, I know what that error is. That's fine. All right, just for now, I got to get rid of that to fixed. All right, let's try running it again. Run. So now if I run this and I put in 345 and I put in 19, boom, it works. Now it says these are both undefined. Not sure why, but it is. All right, but if I run it again and I put in 345 and I put in 0, all right, it did set that to 0. Something's a little goofy. I think I put the code in the wrong spot, but hopefully you get the idea. All right, I think I put the code, like I said, the code in the wrong spot. So let's go in and look at Chapter 3. Because now what they're going to say with this enhanced miles per gallon, they want to make sure you're putting in a positive number for miles driven. They want to make sure you're putting in a positive number for gallons used, and you want to make sure it's a number. Does all that make sense? We could even set up what are called constants, and we could say that the most miles you can drive between 2 tankfuls is 1,000. and the most gallons you can use is 100. All right, so we'll look at those later. So in this chapter, they go through those. First thing they talk about are relational operators. You look up on the screen here. There are 6 of them. I have 2 numbers. I say var x equals 11, var y equals 10. I'm asking you. Okay, if I say x equal y, true or false? Correct. If I say x not equal to y, true or false? All right. If I say x greater than y, true or false? If I say x less than y, true or false? If I say x greater than or equal to y, true or false? If I say x less than or equal to y, true or false? That's all there is to it. Most of the time when you use relational operators like that, you'll use it when you're checking 2 numerical values. Doesn't have to be that. All right, that could be checking 2 names to see if they're the same, for example. All right? But those are your relational operators. It's the relationship, in this case, between 2 different variables. We also have logical operators. Okay? Now I want to make sure you get this, so I'm going to explain this, and I'm going to explain it, just don't even look up there. But let's talk about it in non-computer terms. Okay? What I'm about to tell you isn't going to happen. But let's pretend, for the lack of something better, that I tell you all, I'm going to have a party. And if you want to go to the party, 2 things have to be true. You have to be more than 21 or over, because alcohol will be served, and you have to be in the AWD program. That makes sense? Has to be one or the other. So I would write a condition that would say something like, if age greater than or equal to 21 and 2 ampersands and major equal AWD, then you can come to the party. Does that make sense? The problem is that I do that and none of you want to come. So I bought all this stuff, and for whatever reason, people just don't want to come. So I change it from and, meaning that both of these have to be true, to or. That's a pipe sign. That's right up above your enter key on your keyboard. All right? That means that either one of those, that means that anyone who's 21 or over and anyone who's in the AWD program, regardless of their age, can come. Does that make sense? You could meet with an or, you could meet one criteria, both criteria, or neither criteria. It's only if you're under 21 and you're not in the AWD program can you not come. All right? Then we've got not. Well, it reverses something. So if I say if married equal true, let me tell you. One nice thing about virtually every programming language, you don't have to write it like that. There's a shortcut that says this. If you put just a variable in there, the system assumes it's a Boolean variable. These 2 things are the same. Don't write this one. It's too much typing. All right? If I want to say if married equal false, I just say not. If not married. All right? That's it. So the not reverses the value. It's also called an inverter. It takes things that are true and makes them false. It takes things that are false and makes them true. All right? This is the order of precedence, because you can write really complex expressions. You do nots first, then you do ands, then you do ors, unless you use parentheses. All right. I already showed you the basics of an if statement, so I'm not going to run through that. We've already looked at it. You can also do looping. Why would you want to do looping? If I have 10,000 people who work for me at a company, I want to be able to write some kind of some code that will figure out their payroll. And I want to run that 10,000 times. I don't want to write that thing for the payroll and have to copy that in 10,000 times. That doesn't make any sense. All right. Now, if I told you what I want you to do is I want you to write on the screen right now. This is a quick JavaScript test. Write the numbers on the screen from 1 to 10. Okay? One way you could do that is you could say document dot writeLine 1. And then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, and 7, then 9, then 10. Does that make sense? You could put in 10 statements like that. And I say, oh, that's right. I don't want you to go from 1 to 10. I want you to go from 1 to 100. So you do that. Now, no, I mean 1 to 1,000. After a while, it's like, this is ridiculous. All right? So what we can do is we can write instead for, the word for, and we make a variable name up. Doesn't matter what it's called. Here's where you can use a crummy name. I use LCV. LCV is an acronym that stands for Loop Control Variable. It's the variable that will control how many times we go through the loop. So I'm going to say for LCV equal to 1, LCV less than or equal to 10. Now I've got that plus plus thing I showed you before, LCV. Now I put in here my document.writeLine, LCV, and that's going to print on the screen all the numbers from 1 to 10. Does that make sense when you look at it? This will automatically, this step right here is called the initialization. So I'm initializing the variable called LCV. I'm initializing it to 1. This is called the test. I'm testing it to see if it's less than or equal to 10. This is called either the incrementer or the decrementer. If I was doing a program that was simulating blasting off a rocket, I would go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. I would count backwards. So instead of a plus plus, I would use a minus minus. Yes?
You wanted exactly 10. Why did you put the less than? Why did you just use the equal sign?
Right here?
Yeah.
Because if I wanted it to be equal to 10, it would never run. Because it's 1, it wouldn't be equal to 10. So what this does is it comes through the first time, it says it's 1. Is 1 less than or equal to 10? Yeah, it is. So it says do this, then add 1 to it. Now it's 2. Is that less than or equal to 10?
Oh, okay.
So it basically, and eventually it'll be, that's 10. Is that less than or equal to 10? Yeah. So it'll come back and add 1 more to it. That's 11. Is that less than or equal to 10? No. That's when you'll pop out of the loop. All right. You can also take that same code that's in there. A for loop that I'm showing you right there is called a counting loop. You need to know exactly how many times you're going through it. But I can also go and write that same code like this. So I can come in and say var. Okay. I can say var LCV equal 1. While, all lowercase, LCV less than or equal to 10. Then I can say document.write LCV, but now I have to tell it to add 1. So plus plus LCV. That does the same thing. So what's the advantage? This one's got less code. All right. This one can be used in certain situations where this can't. We're not going to talk about that right now. Finally, I can write it like this. I can say var LCV equal 1 do, okay, and I can put a curly brace in there. Good curly brace. And I can say document dot writeLine LCV plus plus LCV in my curly. Now I say while LCV is less than or equal to 10 with a semicolon on the end. I got a question for you. Please look on the screen. All right. If I put this in there, Now it's equal to 11. How many times do you think I run this? No. How many? Huh? Nope. Yes. Why? Yeah, because 11 is not less than or equal to 10. All right? If your initial condition is false, you never do the body of the loop, ever. All right? In the same way, if I do this and I make it 11, I never go into that body. Now, Chris, I think you're the one who said 1. This one always runs. Even if this is equal to 111, it'll print out 111. It'll add 1 to it that's 112, but it doesn't make the test till the bottom. All right? These two are called pretests because you make the test before you go into the body of the loop. That's called a post-test. All right? Anything that you do with a while loop, anything you do with a for loop, you can always do with one of these other two. But what you can do with these two is what if I'm a programmer and I'm saying while I still have records, but I don't know how many records there are. So while there are still records, do all this. I can't do that in a for loop. With a for loop, I need to know where it starts and where it ends. I don't need to necessarily know that with a while loop or a do while loop. All right? So there's the for if you want it more detailed than I just gave it to you. Then they've got these 3 applications. So what they're doing in here is again, this is kind of a neat program. All right? var again, it allows you to run this miles per gallon program again and again and again. When you get done running it, it asks you. It says, do you want to do it again? And if you put a Y in there for yes, it'll do it again. If you put anything, if you put anything in there that's not a Y, it won't do it again. All right? Plus, notice what they're checking here. If is NaN, if it's not a number, not a number, meaning if this is a number that's greater than 0, and the other one is, then do it. You could put a big, ugly butt number in there, but it would still do it as long as it's positive. All right, then they've got this future value. Why? Because Muroc loves doing future value. What that says is, if you invest $30 a month for 10 years at 3%, at the end of that 10 years, how much money will you have made? All right, that's future value type of thing. So they do a future value application. And then they enhance the test scores. Again, how? Whoops. They go through there and they make checks. They make sure that the test score you entered was valid. It's between 0 and 100. If it's not, you don't accept it. Okay? Now notice, you're like, well, what the heck is this then? The 999. What that does, that's known as a sentry value. That's a value that would, if I said, hey, Luke, how'd you do on that last test? He goes, pretty good. I got 999 out of 100. Well, in fact, Christian, I think you're the one who came up to me and said earlier in the semester, the test was worth 50 points, but he got like a 74 on it or something like that because I goofed up. And he was good enough to tell me. All right? But that's a sentry value. That's a value that never should be entered. But it's a special value that would end this. So if it's 999, all right, if it is 999, you'll get out of the program. All right, the last thing they talk about in here, I'm going to mention this to you, but it's way too early to introduce this, are what are called arrays. If I had 100 students in my classroom and I wanted to figure out, 100 grades, I could have var student 1 equal var student 2 equal, etc. I could have 100 different variables. Nothing at all wrong with doing that. Or I could have one variable that had 100 different components. If you say, I don't get it, I think you do. All right, before I moved into my house, I lived in an apartment complex that had 8 storage units in it. And if somebody would have put my address in there but not the right apartment number, it probably still would have gotten to me. Because there were 8 mail slots. They all had the same address, but they were designated differently because they were apartment 20 or apartment 21 or apartment 22, etc. That's what you do with arrays. It's one variable that contains multiple values. All right. It's also what's known as a data structure. It's not that important right now. It'll be very important as we go on. Okay. All right, so they come back and they put this into an array. I don't want to go over it because, like I said, I think it's way too much to be throwing at you right now. I think I've thrown enough at you for one day. All right. So let me ask you this. It is 10:27. All right. Would you rather take the test on Chapter 2, the written test, tomorrow, and the one on Chapter 3 on Friday? Or would you rather take them both Friday? I'm letting democracy rule here. How many people would rather take both of them on Friday? All right, that's 3, 4 who voted. Well, you sort of voted. And how many people would rather have the first one tomorrow? Okay, of course, that's 4 to 4. All right, which means somebody didn't vote. All right, what we'll do is we'll have both of them on Friday. All right, because then tomorrow what I'll be able to do tomorrow is I will give you the test review first thing for both tests. That make sense? Then this is what you're going to get from me tomorrow, just so you see it. You're going to get a folder, and that folder is going to be called AWD1000. I'll change the name because it's got today's date on it. And it'll have like 6 different iterations of a payroll program. The first one, all we're doing in there is we're setting a first name, a last name, an hours worked, and an hourly rate, and a gross pay. So every time I run this program, it's going to say, Jeff, Scott, 40 hours, $10 an hour, 1,000. Does that make sense? All right. The bad thing about that is every time I run it, because I hard-coded the data in, all right, so you've got 6 iterations that go from nothing in there to writing functions and using arrays. So tomorrow, it'll probably take from 8 till 9 to do the test review for the 2 tests. Then from 9 to 10, I will go over these. And I will also give you out what you're going to be doing for your homework. All right? Then Friday, what we'll do is we will take those 2 tests. Then we will look for a little bit, the time we have between 9 and 10, we will look at wireframing. All right? As of right now, maybe we won't even have the test, the hands-on on Monday. I want to give you enough examples where you say, I at least kind of know what you're talking about. All right? Questions? All right, so let me pass these back to, these are your midterms. Everybody did well. Everybody got a B or everybody got an A. All right. If you still have not sent me the path on iwt.rankin.edu, you still haven't sent me that to where you have both of these on the Rankin server, I would like those as soon as possible, please. I don't want to have to look through your stuff. And the reason yours yesterday, Chase, where we had to put in that spa thing, if you would have just named that thing index.html, we wouldn't have had to do that. Now you're Evan R. Jeez Louise. There. again, just so you know, the reason that I'm asking you to send me those is I'm going to take those links, put them into an email, send that out to Tom today. And I noticed with some of you, at first I was going to take off, but then I'm like, I can't take off for that. I'm going to ask him when I email him today, hey, what about that audio clip you were doing for me, and what about the video clip? I'm hoping that he has done that. All right, so that can be added. Again, with some of you, I tried to write, if I took off, I tried to write a little thing over there to explain why. And I'm going to keep doing this as far as about 10% of your grade. If you don't follow directions or whatever, that you're going to lose some points there. All right? If you want to come and argue with me about your points or anything else, that's always your right to do that. You can add them up to make sure that I added correctly. If I added incorrectly, but it's in your favor, don't say anything. And if it's not in your favor, then come back and tell me, and I'll go back and look at it again. All right? So the rest of the period is like I said, is yours. If you are caught up on everything, then I would suggest strongly that you go back and you read chapters 1, 2, and 3 of the book, especially 2 and 3.